On today's episode of Locked On Wild, will a big bump in the postseason for Matt Boldy translate to a giant 2025-2026?
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we are going back to class for Matt Boldy's 2024-2025 season. We'll evaluate his production, his importance to the team, and we will discuss today whether or not a huge jump in the postseason for Boldy this year is going to translate to a monster 2025-2026. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, credentialed media member and host of Seth on Sports as well. And before we get to Matt Boldy's eval, I got to get something off my chest here. I was in a charity softball event yesterday, which is why we did not have a Thursday episode. I was tied up pretty much all afternoon. Turns out if you have not been on the baseball diamond for a few years, you tend to get a little sore. So it's going to be a quiet weekend for me this weekend, which means that we'll probably get a couple episodes for you here over the next couple of days. So keep an eye out for that. But this is why I have been pretty straightforward about the approach and what we're going to be talking about in the months of July and August, because I've seen no shortage of speculation on other shows. Basically, if a player breathes, they are linked to the Minnesota Wild in potential trade packages. I'm not gonna single anybody out. You probably can guess who I'm talking about, though. Unless there has been a legitimate tie to a particular player, you could go down every player on every team and say, yeah, they'd be a great fit for the Wild. But there's a reason that 99% of that stuff never happens. Is you have to have two teams willing to make a trade. You have to have a player that does not want to be where they currently are, and you have to have a team that's willing to give up the prospects and the assets to get them. So with the fact that free agency is long done, with the fact that it is pretty quiet as far as news goes, we're on a set path here. If news happens, whether it be extensions or trades or even, hey, here's some steam as to a particular move that might happen, yeah, we'll talk about it. We'll discuss it. But I don't want to spend the whole summer just writing a bunch of names down on the wall and throwing as many darts as I can and just, here'd be a good trade. There is a point where speculation is kind of fun, but there's a point where speculation becomes overkill. So that's why we're doing all these player evaluations through the month of July. Then in August, we will have crossovers with the other Locked On shows. And then in the month of September, we're going to get refocused in and geared back up for the start of the season with hopefully some coach interviews, hopefully player interviews. We'll talk with other media members. But there's a difference between people that are actually in the media and those that are just kind of pointing at names and saying, yeah, this player would be a good fit for the Wild. It makes sense to talk about it if they've actually been linked. So that's all I'm saying. I just the speculation, like I said, is fun to a point, but after a while, it just becomes, it kind of gets to be overkill. So I value everybody that listens to this show way too much to just go team by team and say, hey, let's trade for this player. Let's trade for this player. So we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it for the rest of the offseason. Let's get back to the task at hand. Matt Boldy's 2024-2025 season. And the numbers for Boldy all told. He finished with 27 goals, 46 assists, 73 total points. He had 6 power play goals, 15 power play assists, 271 shots on goal, and 550 total shot attempts. Those two numbers, we'll come back to those. Boldy played a career high 20 minutes, 17 seconds per night on the ice, 69 blocks, which was far and away his career high, 52 hits, second most that he's had in the season. Now, the 27 goals, his goals have dropped by 2 for 2 consecutive seasons. He went from 31 in 2022-2023 to 29 in 2023-2024 to 27 in 2024-2025. But he has jumped, his assist numbers have jumped from 32 to 40 to 46. So as a result, his points have gone from 63 to 69 to 73. And it's not as though he is passing up shots. Boldy went from 255 shots on goal as a 21-year-old, dropped to 227, but this past year, a career high in shots on goal at 271, and a career high in total shot attempts at 550. It's just that his shooting percentage dropped by a couple of percentage points. And there were plenty of one-timers and others that just did not go this season. So this just gives you a good indicator of how much a couple of percentage points in a career high shots on goal that can deviate you a couple of goals. I think the overall thing to take away from this season is that Boldy played all 82 games, career high in points. He was taking his shots. He played a career high in minutes. His usage went way, way up this year, and he seemed like he was able to handle it. As far as some of the other metrics for Boldy go, his Corsi 4 percentage in all situations this year was 56%. Now, that was a dip from the last couple of seasons, but he did bump up and down in the lineup a few times, and there were some line combinations that just didn't work. But he still was able to just put up a really, really solid season. As far as the point shares go for Boldy, 5.5 offensive point shares, which tied a career high that he set last year. 2.1 defensive point shares, which was a career high in any of his 4 seasons in the NHL so far. And the 7.5 total point shares that he had was a career best. As far as where that ranks amongst the rest of the Minnesota Wild players, Boldy's 5.5 offensive point shares ranks second to Kirill Kaprizov. His defensive point shares at 2.1, he was the best defensive forward on the team. Now, that spot normally would go to Joel Eriksson-Ek, but Eriksson-Ek played just 41 games this year. So Boldy was 7th on the team in defensive point shares, and his total point shares of 7.5 was best on the team. As far as usage goes, we did see our standard usage for Boldy. He was 3rd on the team in power play time on ice per game at just over 3 minutes. We did see Boldy start to get a little bit of penalty kill time this season, but you know what you're getting with Boldy. You're getting a bona fide top 6 guy with some top line upside, as long as the rest of the lineup is capable of handling things. When they're not, he moves to the second line, because if you only have one line that's capable of scoring, well, turns out that's a little difficult to handle. He's a number 1 power play guy. He is pretty key to the Minnesota Wild in just about every situation that comes about. And if you look at it as well, Boldy had 10 game-winning goals this year. Now, I know game-winning goals isn't like it's not a concrete stat, because if you win a game 5-1, but you score the second goal of the game, that can be counted as a game-winning goal. So it's much like plus minus. It is, it's kind of dicey sometimes, but 10 game-winning goals is a career high. And he certainly had many clutch moments this season, as will be reflected in the grading system that we'll get to in the second segment. But in the third segment today, we're going to also talk about kind of an interesting scenario that could play out depending on how Vladimir Tarasenko plays. So we'll talk about that. Of course, playoff-wise for Boldy, he had 5 goals and 2 assists in 6 games. Him and Kirill Kaprizov both wrecked the Vegas Golden Knights early in that series. The Golden Knights were able to adjust, because turns out if you have 2 players that are doing most of the scoring, kind of easy to scheme against. And the Golden Knights just seemed to get better as the series went on. But still, 5 goals in a 6-game span is pretty impressive. And a big question will be, what does next season look like for Boldy after that strong postseason? We'll talk about all that as the show unfolds. I want to get to our grades for Boldy, which we will discuss as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Look, we've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. My favorite feature of Game Time is their panoramic seat views, because think about how many times you've gone to a venue you're not 100% familiar with. There's nothing worse than not knowing what to expect from your view in the arena or in the concert hall. Game Time gives you a full look at what you'll be able to see from your vantage point, so you never have to worry about sitting behind an inadvertent pillar ever again. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We are your team each and every day as well. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. All right, let's get to the grading scale for Matt Boldy. So first category, pretty easy one. Games played and availability. Boldy gets full marks here. He gets all 20 points because he played in the full 82-game schedule. Pretty easy, pretty standard. Boldy, durability is a big part of the equation. You can't help the team if you're on the trainer's table. So Boldy gets the full 20. On-ice impact, which includes stats and context. Boldy had 73 points on the season, 27 goals, 46 assists. That was good for 0.89 points per game for the full 82. So Boldy gets full points there. He gets the full 15 because he is in the plus 0.75 points per game or higher category. So basically how we have this is 0 to a quarter, quarter to a half, half to 3 quarters, and then 3 quarters and above. And if you're a 3/4 point per game player, that's pretty good. So Boldy gets the full 15 there. As far as the other points go, strong expected goals for and positive Corsi for numbers, a top unit power play contributor, and took some nice steps forward defensively this year as well. So he gets the full analytics bonus, and his total on ice impact score is 20 out of 20. Importance to the team and his role: a top line winger at times alongside Kirill Kaprizov and Joel Eriksson Ek at various points. He's been a second line player at minimum, top line player, and has seen his numbers increase when he plays on that top line, which is where I think the Wild would like to get him back to eventually, if they can just figure out how to get consistent production from line 2. So he played in key situations all throughout the season, whether it be on the power play, whether it be late in games and overtime. There's no situation that's too big for Matt Boldy. So he gets full marks there at 20 out of 20, and he has solidified himself as one of those inner pieces. He's not Kirill Kaprizov. He's not like the face of the franchise type guy, but he is a pillar. He is a pillar of this team, and the numbers back that up. At 23 years old, you look at where he is compared to the rest of his counterparts drafted in 2019. Boldy is second amongst every player drafted in 2019 in the first round. Well, in every round, he has 244 total points in 285 games. The only player that has more is Jack Hughes, and Jack Hughes has played in 368 total games. So Boldy with 285, he's at 244 for points. Cole Caulfield's at 219. Dylan Cousins at 213. Boldy is third in goals amongst 2019 drafted players, but second in points. So he certainly is making his mark and his impact on the roster as just a young player. So he's a pillar. He is one of the foundation pieces of this Minnesota Wild organization. As far as consistency and clutch goes, Boldy got off to a torrid start this year. There was some talk that he could potentially have a 40-40 season, 50-50 season he was on pace for at one point. Obviously, the numbers kind of cooled off a little bit. He had about a month stretch where he got pretty cold. And once he got that figured out, once he kind of snapped out of that, he really got back to where he was at the beginning of the season. But he started off scorching hot, cooled a little bit in the middle, and once he got back to that mark, he was just fine for the rest of the season. Delivered a bunch of game winners, as we noted, and he's going to get, as far as consistency and clutch goes, we're going 13 out of 15 for this category. Now, growth, intangibles, and storylines did take a step forward as far as a shoot your shot type player, career high in shots, one of the highest totals on the team as far as that goes. He played in the Four Nations face-off. He looks like he will be a player that makes the Olympic team. Like, there's a lot of good things trending for Boldy that are going to help with his leadership here in Minnesota. And obviously, you've got a bunch of players that kind of are higher up on the hierarchy as far as leadership goes. But it seems like Boldy is starting to take more of that on as he gets older and gets more accustomed to the NHL. So as far as growth goes, as far as some of those intangibles go, we're going to go 13 out of 15 there as well, which leads to a final score of 86 out of 100. And the summary that we've got for this puts him in the elite and reliable category. Now, if you'll recall, 90 to 100 is franchise cornerstone. Elite and reliable is 80 to 89 points. Key contributor is 70 to 79 points. Solid but replaceable is 60 to 69. Depth piece / disappointment is 50 to 59, and under 50 is needs a reset. So Boldy is at 86 out of 100, an elite and reliable player for the Wild. Matt Boldy officially made the leap in 2024-2025. His offensive output was top tier, but more importantly, he became a guy you expect to make a difference every night. Drove his own line at times, stepped up when Kaprizov missed games, and was able to, other than the one stretch, was able to avoid being completely invisible. Not just a supporting star anymore. He's become a foundational force for the Minnesota Wild. There are some fascinating, and I think, I think I'm very okay with the grade, and I think I'm more so okay with the grade considering how the season ended and what he did in the postseason, because until Vegas found a way to just throw the kitchen sink at him and Kirill Kaprizov, it was a step up and just do it type performance, which is exactly what we were looking for from Boldy over the course of his early seasons, and he definitely found that. But there are some things that are going to factor into this upcoming season that I'd like to discuss to finish the show today. We'll take a look ahead. We'll also remind you that Boldy is signed to one of the more team-friendly contracts that exist. That's all on the way as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We are your team each and every day, and we encourage you to like and subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. If you're listening on one of the many audio platforms, we thank you and love having you on board. Make sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you listen. We're thankful that you are here with us as well. All right, let's take a look. Let's take an initial look ahead for Matt Boldy. We're going to do more of this as we get closer to the season, but here's the thing with Boldy. So he obviously took a big step forward in the postseason. If he can be that type of guy, at points throughout this upcoming season, he's going to end up really the only spot that he can go from here is becoming a true point per game player and going from a 30-ish goal player to a 40-ish goal player per season. If he takes that leap, he is going to be a monster for this team. But a lot of what happens with Boldy this year is predicated on what happens with the second line. My preference would be to have Boldy and Kaprizov anchoring the same line. The only way that's possible is if you have other players in the top six that are capable of holding down that second line. For instance, if Matt Zuccarello and Vladimir Tarasenko have good seasons this year, you can put them on line two, and you don't have to worry about becoming a one-dimensional team. But if they struggle, or if Zuccarello's scoring as it has been at times in the past, if his scoring takes a big hit when he's not with Kirill Kaprizov, then you can't really do that, can you? You got to have Zuccarello on the top line with Kirill Kaprizov, and then Matt Boldy becomes a line two player with Vladimir Tarasenko or whoever else. Matt Boldy finds a way to elevate that season in which he was with Kaprizov and Joel Eriksson Ek. That was one of the best lines in hockey as far from a production standpoint. And I would like to see him continue to get those types of opportunities, because then if they're both on the same line, if you throw all of your attention at Kirill Kaprizov, good luck. And then you throw requisite attention at Matt Boldy, and that leaves Kirill Kaprizov with one-on-one opportunities. It's all about maximizing the chances that your best player can make the best plays on the ice. So a lot of what Matt Boldy does this year rides on what Matt Zuccarello and Vladimir Tarasenko or what they're able to do in the early part of the season. One of the single biggest things that I'll be watching this year is how does Matt Boldy look after what he did in the postseason? If he becomes one of those players that just so many of those goals against Vegas, just where I'm going straight to the net, there's not a thing you can do to stop me, and I'm just going to let it rip, and I'm going to get the goal. If he becomes somebody that does that, that's going to be nasty. That is going to be a nasty addition to this team for a guy that is making $7 million per year for the foreseeable future. Boldy is signed through 2030 at $7 million per season. Think about where Boldy would be at from a AAV standpoint if he was signing an extension this offseason or next offseason. You'd be talking about a guy that was pushing probably 9 per year for the production that he has put together. Might be a little high, but you get the point. It's an incredibly team-friendly deal, and Boldy far and away exceeds what he's being paid with value added back. And we're talking about a guy who will be 24 for this upcoming season. And if he continues, he took some nice strides defensively this year. If he continues to do that while continuing to push his offensive repertoire in the right direction, you're talking about a guy that can make massive impacts on both sides of the ice. And he then, that's somebody that is going to be further and further in the long-term plans of this franchise. And I just, as far as the question marks on this team go, I feel like Boldy is much lower on the list than some of the other players on this list. And of the players in the top 6 right now, Kirill Kaprizov is a permanent marker in the top 6. Matt Boldy is a permanent marker in the top 6. You've got what has been going on all offseason with some of the other names. Matt Zuccarello is a pencil right now. Vladimir Tarasenko is a pencil. Joel Eriksson Ek is probably a marker in the top 6 right now. There's going to be a lot of changes over the next couple of seasons, and the Wild are looking at trying to bring somebody in to add to that top 6 that's more of a marker than a pencil. But I remember when there was conversation a couple of off seasons ago on the Brady Tkachuk side of things. And, what would you give up to get a Brady Tkachuk on your team? As we go, as seasons build up, and as Boldy continues to add numbers to his ledger, a couple of seasons ago, people were saying, all right, Matt Boldy's the centerpiece to that deal. What else are you giving up to get Brady Tkachuk? I don't know if I'm as inclined to make that deal anymore. We saw a little bit of the kind of sandpaper attitude to Boldy's game as the season unfolded, but we saw more of it in the postseason. And Bill Guerin pretty plainly told Boldy at the end of the 2023-2024 season that he couldn't play soft. So if you add all these things together, and if the playoff Boldy is any indication of the type of player that we're going to get in 2025, 2026, this will be the year that you can officially pencil him down for a 40-40. You heard it right here first. So I'm really excited to see what Boldy has in store this year. We'll see if we can get him on the show to ask him himself where he's at in his preparation and kind of what he is expecting from this upcoming season. But Matt Boldy, a strong 2024-2025, and just continues to climb the steps in his career. And if he has a monster campaign, then maybe he'll be number one on that top 10 under 25 list for NHL players. But that's what we got for you here for today's episode. Again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. And make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day.